develop an interest, or how did you develop an interest in even investing at such an early age?
Yep.
And how much do you think that's propelled you into where you're at today?
Why is really the way I was brought up. My folks in particular. My dad was a independent contractor, had his own business, but worked by himself. Did well in terms of his earnings, but really made his money based on investing. And I was always interested in it. And he would never really share a whole lot with me about what was in there. But he would always tell me like when the market did good. So he would tell me, today was a good day because, or today was a bad day because, and the Dow went up some number of points back in whatever it was, 2000 or 1998 or whatever we were having these conversations. And honestly, he instilled the idea of if you put the money in the markets and you kind of got no reason to sell it, as long as you're buying good companies and you hold them, things work out pretty well. And it has. And it's worked out really well for them in that regard. And really the only difference between my philosophy and theirs is just I had a high income for an extended period of time. So I've been able to accelerate it a little bit more than maybe they were able to. But yeah, the way we were brought up, my mom's money went to paying for all of our things. My dad's money went to paying for taxes and for investing. And it's kind of worked out that way with myself and my wife at our house too. She pays for most of our daily living expenses. I pay our mortgage and our investing. It kind of works out in that way.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 382.
This is the podcast where everyday millionaires share the real stories behind their wealth, how they built it, what they invested in, and the missteps they encountered along the way. We're your hosts, Jason and Stacy, and we're diving into candid conversations with people who just might be your next door neighbors. So tune in and get ready to discover how regular people like you and me turned their aspirations into achievements. And don't worry, while we dig deep for the details, we keep it all family friendly.
We are on the eve of the election, which will be kind of nice in some ways to put all that behind us, and we'll be able to kind of see what the policies may look like as it relates to the economy and everything else. So excited for that, as I'm sure many of us are. It's been quite a wild election season. Today, actually, before we get into that, a few more housekeeping things. We're still looking for our 400th millionaire, worth $400 million. I reached out to Kevin O'Leary. Haven't got a response yet, so TBD on that still. If you know of anybody, or if you're listening to the show, you got a net worth of $400 million plus, willing to share, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. Also continue to look for everyday millionaires, those that are worth any amount of millions. They want to come to the show, share their story, share their journey. Send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. This is the anniversary month of the podcast. We'll probably spend a little time, maybe in the next couple of weeks, talking a little bit about that. But today's episode with Olin, he's got a net worth of $13.5 million. He's a business owner in a digital marketing space. He's had a business for just around 12 years. And he has become a millionaire in essentially every asset class. Became a millionaire in real estate, became a millionaire in the market, in taxable accounts, and almost there on tax advantage accounts as well. And then in business. So kind of an interesting strategy. He's been investing in the market since he was a teenager. His dad was very instrumental in planting that seed for him. And we get into a discussion about that. And he just had his first child, and a second one is on the way. So his journey has been flipped on its head a little bit in some respects, and we dive deep into that as well. So going to be a great episode. Without any further delay, let's get right into it with Olin.
Olin, do you want to just give us about your background and what you're up to now?
Sure. I own a digital marketing agency currently. I've been doing so since 2012. Focus most of my investments are there, or most of my equity is tied up there. But also I've been building up taxable investments, retirement income, some real estate portfolio. but the majority of my time spent on our digital marketing company.
Awesome. And how long did you say you've been doing the digital marketing for?
We've had our own business. Myself and a business partner started it in 2012. And about 5 years prior to that, was doing it for a larger organization, similar services.
Okay. Well, I feel like that's kind of a unique, not unique, but a common kind of entrepreneurial journey of getting kind of a skill set somewhere, leveraging that to then kind of start your own business. Was that always the plan?
No, the plan was kind of an odd one, honestly. I moved to Chicago in, I think it was 2006. Took a job before moving down. Realized on my first day that job was not the fit for me. But now I had a lease signed and bills to pay. So I got a call from another organization offering a job selling digital marketing technology, essentially. So took it kind of out of necessity. And that grew into something that turned out to be pretty good at, and did that for 5 years and loved talking to the clientele that we were talking to regularly, and eventually just kind of outgrew the services that we were offering and started feeling a little bit like we were giving more cookie cutter services than anything else. So me and my partner, who I met at work, my business partner, kind of back of a napkin said, you want to try to do this on your own and offer more comprehensive solutions? And there you go. So it was kind of a fortuitous day one quit of a job, and turned into something that doing now that probably wouldn't have otherwise.
That's awesome. I want to get more into the weeds on the story, but before we do, what's your net worth today?
Just over 13 and a half, depending on how you want to count the business value.
Okay. And how is that broken up?
I can rattle them off if you want. I got my spreadsheet that I track everything on. In terms of like cash and high yield savings, there's about 900. There's additional about 700 in cash that's in the business account. Half of that actually, or so there's twice as much of that, but half of that is what I would consider as part of mine. 401k, there's about 700. SEP IRA, there's about 300. On old Roth, there's about 75,000. About $1.5 million in taxable investments. 75 grand that flexes quite a bit in a alternative investment through when cannabis became legalized. We invested in a company that sold and converted into stock. And then about 6.5, 6.7 in business. My wife's garden center has a value on it that's probably conservatively at 150 to 200,000, and then the rest of it in real estate. So we own the office building that we operate out of. I own a condo that I now rent out, and we own our next door to our house we bought in April. Actually, for future plans of tearing it down and building a bigger yard, which is about 550, and then the primary residence here, we probably have around 750,000 in equity. So 2.5 million in real estate, give or take, just under 7 in business, $1.5 million or so in taxable, $1 million or so in retirement, and about 1.6, give or take, in cash.
Dude, quite the breadth of investments. You basically become a millionaire in every kind of category that everybody says, hey, if I'm a stock market guy, that's the only way to make it. If I'm a real estate guy, that's the only way to make it. If I'm an entrepreneur, that's the only way to make it. You've really done it in every single facet.
Yeah, you just enlightened me to that, I suppose. I hadn't thought about it that way.
So the real estate, do you have debt on any of that? Mortgages?
Yeah. So on my condo, I've had it since 2008. There is some debt on that. I'm only counting the equity in what I gave you. I think the debt on there is around 200,000. On the primary residence, there's a mortgage that's right now around 700,000. So we were only talking about the equity there as well. And then on the house we bought next door, that was a cash purchase. So there's no debt there.
Okay. So your leverage position is pretty low relative to the equity in most of this real estate.
In all of them, yeah, for sure. It's intentional. That was not my chosen path of wealth building in any way, but it is becoming of interest. I mean, honestly, part of listening to like shows like yours and other podcasts, doing research about where to put dollars, that might be something I'm looking to grow in the not so distant future, but definitely don't love the idea of being over leveraged in something that I'm not fluent in.
Yeah, for sure. So talk us through, I mean, how do you think about, getting to where you've got to, where dollars that you're coming into your household, how are you allocating in your mind? Hey, I want to have, this cash position of Y. I want to have real estate of X. I'd like to have, retirement accounts that are set aside. I mean, talk us
Yeah.
through kind of the mindset of where you've gotten to and how you've gotten there.
It all starts with any dollars that come in. They're accounted for in terms of the taxable and retirement accounts first. So I set up a drip with my financial advisor that goes out every month, no matter what. It's a pretty sizable number. And then with the retirement plans, both myself and my wife max those out. So essentially, extra dollars that come in, for the most part, sit in a cash reserve until I find an opportunity to use them. But if I don't find an opportunity, I'm not in a rush to deploy it.
So in terms of that drip, have you been doing that since you started your professional career? Or did that start developing later?
That started probably about 5 years ago, 6 years ago at this point. Maybe a little bit more, but it's been growing in terms of the number that it is historically over the past handful of years. So right now it's up to around $12,000 a month or so that get dripped into a taxable investment account, and the majority of that actually goes into a tax loss harvesting account. And the intention there is to build some losses that ultimately one day will be realized through some of the sales of this real estate and or the sale of the business at some point, to try to offset some of the state and federal taxes that are likely to be substantial if things continue to plan out.
Okay. And you said you started that basically like 5 years ago?
In terms of the drip, yeah, but I've been investing since I've been 14, 15 in the stock market in one way or another. So my dad got me into it really early. And I think he did something that was pretty genius with my sister and myself, where when we both first started high school, he essentially gave us a initiative to do well in school. And the initiative was, when you graduate, you can either have 15 grand in stock or a car worth 15 grand. My sister graduated as valedictorian, so she showed me up a little bit and took the stock. And then when I graduated with a couple of B's, I got the same thing and also took the stock. So ever since then, honestly, it's either been putting some money in individual stocks or funds or Roth IRAs back when I could contribute there. So there's been money going into investments since, I can remember.
And did you, I guess, how old were you when you got the talk of, hey, you can have 15 grand in stock or a $15,000 car?
I think I was 14.
Oh, okay. So you're pretty advanced in your studies and age and
I
teenage
didn't make
years.
the decision at the age of 14 of which one to take. It was just, hey,
that's what it got presented.
You're going to have an option of one of these two things. So, and honestly, I don't think the option of the car was really going to happen in the first place. I think it was just a carrot to try to get you to do good at school with something shiny instead of planning for your future.
I gotcha. So you started investing really early. Mm-hmm. Were you always contributing to retirement accounts, I guess, when you were going through kind of those college years and in your first jobs?
Yeah, always. If anything I could max out, I'd max out. I did the math on compound interest long ago and realized that, time is your biggest friend, and putting in what I could when we were first starting to earn anything, with 401ks from companies and at least getting the match out of them. And, strangely, I've only worked at 2 jobs. I'm 40. So my current job is 2 real, out of college jobs, but, contributed to retirement accounts during both of those and rolled those over into the now SEP IRA that we have. And it's always been
You should know what that is. That's the best kind of notification. That's the sound of another sale on Shopify. And the moment another business dream reality comes true. Shopify is the e-commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. In fact, I use it for several businesses that I have and my wife has. We love Shopify. Shopify simplifies selling online, and you can focus successfully growing your business. Shopify covers every sales channel from in-person POS system to all-in-one e-commerce, and it even lets you sell across social media marketplaces like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Packed with industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, Shopify gives you the comfort of your business and your brand without having to learn new skills or design new code. And thanks to 24/7 help and an extensive business course library, Shopify is there to help you have success every step of the way. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/unveiled, lowercase. Go to shopify.com/unveiled to take your business to the next level. Once again, that's shopify.com/unveiled. And thanks again to Shopify for sponsoring today's episode.
A drip.
So I want to go through a little exercise with you, if you don't mind, because I think it's really interesting. Do you know when you essentially became a millionaire had $1 million worth of real estate. Do you remember how old you were when that happened?
The real estate side, it would have just been a year or two ago, a couple years ago.
Okay.
Maybe
So
3,
late
4 years
30s,
ago,
call it.
actually. Yeah,
Mid to
like
late
mid
30s.
30s. When we bought our office building is probably when that happened. When we bought our office building, we got an SBA loan on it. And our banker, we work with a really small private banker in Chicago. He gave me a really good piece of advice that I ended up handing out, where he took part of the loan and just gave me the interest rate at prime and looked at our books and was like, look, pay this thing down as quickly as you can. I'll give you a dirt cheap rate and then just keep the SBA portion of it. So myself and my business partner did that. And over a couple year window, we had like 60% of the building paid off and carry a really low monthly overhead on it. So it's probably when that first loan was paid off, where in real estate, I would argue that it broke that threshold or became near that, between that and the condo at the time.
Okay. And when do you, and I guess was your primary a part of that as well, around mid 30s, late 30s?
I guess, yeah, if you added that too, it would have been before then. But I've never been a big advocate of counting my primary residence as part of my worth at all, because you got to live somewhere.
Okay.
So it's there. It's definitely a good sizable number, but not something I kind of entertain when I'm doing my own math, you know?
Okay. What about when you had it in, you call it non tax advantaged accounts, not brokerage account?
Yep. So that would have probably been a couple of years prior. So maybe 35.
Okay. So 35, you hit that. What about in your retirement or tax advantaged accounts?
That actually probably just crossed like this year. So 401k, SEP, and Roth combined, it's at $1,050,000 right now. So don't know the exact day, but that had to have been this year at some point based on the gains in the markets.
So that one took you, call it, the greater part of 2 decades and some change.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, I guess, in the accumulation of cash? You've probably been all over the place on that, but when was kind of that first chunk? You're like, hey man, I'm pretty liquid with $1 million or close to it.
Yeah. Maybe 33, 34, based on what we were sitting on in business interests. We've always been pretty heavy there. And the agenda is just never get stuck in a situation where you need to take out a debt that you don't know what that rate's going to be at that date. So we've always kept a pretty safe cushion there. Given the nature of our business, money comes in relatively quickly. So it's not, we rarely really need to hold that kind of cash. It's more of in case there's a oh no moment or several moments, like when COVID happened, for example. A lot of our clients are in like the medical space, and a lot of them shut down kind of overnight. So their marketing funnel turned off overnight. So their billing with us turned off overnight. And because we had that little cushion in there, or sizable cushion in there, safeguarded us from having to lay people off and all sorts of other things that having a rigor reserve, can have its advantages for.
Yeah. When do you think collectively did you become a millionaire? Were you even 30 yet?
Probably just there, right at that point. It all really depends on how you would value the business and when. The business we opened when I was 28, I had no idea what the thing was worth, honestly, until maybe 5 years ago or so when we did a valuation. And we did another one in 2021, and it's kind of where I got the numbers from, and it's grown from there. So honestly, it's probably a little bit more than the numbers we're given today, but try to be conservative with things that are not liquid or somewhat liquid adjacent, and that certainly isn't.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes with businesses because there's the tangibleness, nature, or lack thereof, and at the end of the day, it's really only worth what somebody's going to effectively go and pay you for it. And so you never know in some of those respects until you actually go to market and run a process or actually get that wire in. That's the way I always say it. Deal's never done till the wire's in. Yeah. And even then it just begins.
Yeah. I've been reading up quite a bit on private equity and the way it operates, and they're the likely buyer of us if the time ever comes. So just trying to figure out what that might look like, but it's not something that I kind of look at as a staple of what we're worth today. Most of what I consider when we're really breaking it down is on the cash side, the retirement side, the taxable investment side. Everything else is just kind of in the background. I know it's there, but because it's so illiquid, I try to treat it very differently.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I hear you on that. So all things considered, if we grab all of the assets and asset classes, I mean, you went from, call it millionaire at 30-ish to deca millionaire before you're 40. It's a pretty remarkable trajectory.
Well, compound interest. What are you going to do?
So on that note, I mean, where, hitting 40, that's a big mark in a lot of people's lives. Where do you kind of, from an outlook standpoint, where do you want to go from here? What's the plan 50 and beyond?
Yeah, it's a big debate. So my wife and I had our first kid about 8 months ago, actually 8 months and a day ago. So, and
Congrats.
she's pregnant with our second. So we got Irish twins on the way, right? So things have changed quite a bit, I think, in terms of the thought process there and a little bit more to plan for with the kids. The goal has always been to be able to very, very comfortably not have to earn a living at the age of 50. So all of my planning is about 49 for my wife and 50 for myself, being if we choose to just do whatever we want, we can, and that's the agenda. But I don't know if that's going to work out. Like the fun for me in all this stuff is the competitive nature of it. I like seeing a win happen, So setting goals, hitting goals is fun. And I think that's going to be the struggle when we go from being builders to consumers. So I think I got about 10 years to try to figure out how to transition to be a consumer instead of a builder here.
Has your lifestyle increased as the income and net worth has increased, or have you think you stayed pretty steady?
Steady with the exception of travel and probably the house that we live in. And travel for the most part is all on like business points. We earn a ton of points through Amex and other vendors from just spending a ton of money online on marketing and advertising and whatnot. So the travel is definitely much more excessive, but it doesn't actually cost me much of anything. And then the house, I never thought that we'd have a house that's, probably valued at $1.5 million, maybe a little bit more at this point. It's a little bit overkill, but in Chicago, it's not $1.5 million house isn't like it is in a lot of other places, with the exception of, some of the coasts and other places where cost of living is very high.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's rewind here. You shed light a little bit on what your childhood was like, and a couple other comments about not really thinking this trajectory was going to be the way you went. But I'd love to hear just from you, upbringing. Why did you develop an interest, or how did you develop an interest in even investing at such an early age?
Yeah.
And how much do you think that's propelled you into where you're at today?
Why is really the way I was brought up. My folks in particular. My dad was a independent contractor, had his own business, but worked by himself. Did well in terms of his earnings, but really made his money based on investing. And I was always interested in it. And he would never really share a whole lot with me about what was in there. But he would always tell me like when the market did good. So he would tell me, today was a good day because, or today was a bad day because, and the Dow went up some number of points back in whatever it was, 2000 or 1998 or whatever we were having these conversations. And honestly, he instilled the idea of if you put the money in the markets and you kind of got no reason to sell it, as long as you're buying good companies and you hold them, things work out pretty well. And it has. And it's worked out really well for them in that regard. And really the only difference between my philosophy and theirs is just I had a high income for an extended period of time. So I've been able to accelerate it a little bit more than maybe they were able to. But yeah, the way we were brought up, my mom's money went to paying for all of our things. My dad's money went to paying for taxes and for investing. And it's kind of worked out that way with myself and my wife at our house too. She pays for most of our daily living expenses. I pay our mortgage and our investing. It kind of works out in that way. And always been interested. Father taught me that stuff and just was always naturally gravitated towards it. I remember him sitting on like MSN where he had his spreadsheets shown and all sorts of old now relic search engines where you could track all that stuff. And I remember being on vacations with him where you'd have to check the paper to see what happened with the prices. There wasn't internet at that point. And you'd always be in a good mood or a bad mood depending on what the paper said. So that would kind of see how the day of vacation went. And more often than not, he was happy when it would go up. So he's still that way. 2008, when 2008 happens, with the year he retired, and he got up middle of the night, almost panic sold, 24 times. And Thankfully sat on it, kept it, and never touched it. And now I hear stories with him all the time about going to financial advisors that are trying to change his portfolio. And they're like, we couldn't do any better. And the only thing he did was buy good companies and never, ever sell them.
Did your sister kind of take a liking the same way that you have, or has she chosen a little different route?
She's not as interested. No, she's a little bit more. I hope someone will take care of this for me. She definitely knows the value of it, and they invest, but she's not curious about the day of the market or what companies are interesting or good future plays or why. Definitely interested in the growth of the net worth and knows to put money in retirement accounts, but I don't think she has the same level of curiosity when it comes to this stuff.
Do you think some of that is essentially kind of nature versus the nurture aspect? I mean, I'm always curious about family dynamics, especially like when you're brought up in the same household. And I look at this even with, me and my siblings, and I'm the oldest of four, and my wife, who's the youngest of six, and how differently like all of us thought. Like it was like, well, I think it was the same conversations we're all a part of. Maybe we
Yeah.
sounded different, or like maybe people are just wired so differently that, hey, these are going to be important or not important. Or any thoughts on that, being in that household and how she's sees value but isn't necessarily wired like you are, or takes a liking like you do?
I think a lot of it has to just do with like what parent did you follow? And my mom, for example, like, so my sister's a teacher, so is my mom. And so they have very similar philosophies in life about a lot of things. And again, it gets along great with myself and my father, but he was interested in the entrepreneurial stuff and in investing. And, fast forward down the road, and essentially I'm a carbon copy. And my sister's a carbon copy of my mother. And they worked out great together, but they had different strengths. So, my sister's got a little bit more of the nurture in her than I do, and I have a little bit more of the entrepreneurial spirit, highly competitive nature than probably she does. But obviously, something to be said also for just the way you go about life and what you are. I'm a big, like I mentioned before, just a big fan of, I don't know, I want to win at what I'm doing, and this is a thing that you can keep playing even when you're too old to keep playing the sports you used to, right? So
that's true.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. That's according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. One of the things that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because it's fast, quick, and there are millions of candidates right at your fingertips. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to your jobs to gain more visibility at Indeed.com/unveiled. Just go to Indeed.com/unveiled right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. And thanks again to Indeed for supporting today's episode.
Do you have like a target net worth or anything like that, or a passive income goal?
I've kicked that around 100 times. And honestly, in my head, the number is 10, which is lower than we're at. So I think at this point, it's a little bit more of a game. And I'd love to see that number get to about 20 or 10 in the non-tangible, or sorry, in the fluid stuff. So if we saw 10 in the cash and the retirements and the taxable accounts, et cetera, I'd be pretty happy in that environment. And my financial guy was always giving me a hard time. He's like, everything's going to be great when you're ready to go. And I'm like, well, the reason I think it's going to be great is because I'm always paranoid that it's not. I'm always paranoid that something's going to happen, which I know better. And that's probably why we keep a little bit bigger cash pile than we need. But if you know yourself, you can play to your weaknesses and let your strengths shine through a little bit more.
Absolutely. So at this point, with kind of the buckets that you all that you have, you alluded to it a little bit earlier of basically making sure your brokerage and you've got that drip going and whatnot. But I'm curious from the business standpoint of how much you decide to kind of peel off versus, between you and your partner versus reinvesting back into the business for growth of such one of your largest or the largest asset that you have.
So we've always agreed to keep a certain dollar figure in there more so than anything else. And then we reevaluate the dollar figure. And that's kind of the cash element of it. But when we're talking about like distributions versus keeping money in for rainy day, typically we'll do distributions of about 60% or so, leave the remainder in the account in case it's needed, knowing that a cash call is unlikely, but that it could happen. And the nature of our business is one that doesn't require a lot of like new capital allocations. So it's very rare that we would need to buy something that's extremely expensive that would be, a one-time event. clients will hire us to do the marketing for them. And as such, we're being paid by them typically on a monthly basis, allocating percentages of the dollars that they invest with us to appropriate platforms. There's not a need for like large capital allocations, with the exception of when we bought like the office building, for example, and that ended up being a ton cheaper than rent would have been in hindsight. So it's been a really good thing. And but keeping money there is also partially just for the psychology of myself and my business partner are very different when it comes to the way that we manage our own finances. So I never want to get in a situation where it's awkward for one of us or the other based on someone being able to come up with it or not, if we needed to ever do a cash call. So leaving it there, I think, saves some potential fights and makes sure that we all feel comfortable in what we can do and never limits us for future exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, in terms of growth, like you just say, taking on more clients, then I hire people to kind of help with it. Basically,
Yep.
You don't have a lot of capital outlay to kind of for growth anyway.
Yeah. If anything we do is pretty small. We were talking about like trade shows. Largest trade show is going to be $10,000-$15,000.
Cool.
Bonuses for employees, stuff like that at the end of the year. But all that's planned for when we're looking at allocations throughout.
I'm always curious talking to, entrepreneurs in particular that have such a large swath in their, business. You've taken an approach of going out and developing, investments in the market, which is, I feel like, a little bit contrary to what a lot of people typically do that I see that are business owners. Do you think some of that had to do with the way you were brought up versus kind of, hey, maybe if I didn't have that stock exposure at such a young age that I wouldn't feel as comfortable, or maybe I wouldn't want to invest in the market and I would choose other routes, maybe private equity or real estate more than you have or whatever?
Yeah, I would say that the investing was the first comfort zone, right? So because of that, and I've seen it grow, so I want to continue for it to grow. Instead of realizing that business grows much faster, so I should put all my eggs in that basket. I realistically, that would sound like a smart thing to do, but I would lose sleep at night. So, the business is the most lucrative, but it's also theoretically the most volatile. We could have a day or a week or a year where things went haywire for a variety of reasons. And the market, it can do the same, but 100% of the time it's ever gone down, it's gone back up. And that same can't be said for businesses that go down. They don't always go back up. So it's kind of the diversity of what we have is more of a safety play, and it probably cuts out the high end of what the net worth could be. But same token, it's worked out well for me so far.
Yeah, well, you've got enough offense going from that business to play enough defense for sure, if you want to even call it that, with the market. I mean, it's, and obviously it's worked out. And at the end of the day, you're sleeping well and lifestyle is great. And that's, in a lot of cases, probably what matters the most.
Yeah. Otherwise, what's it all worth?
That's right. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of shoes or pants that you've ever purchased?
Shoes. I have some Ferragamos that I bought back at a handful of years ago. They were probably like $400, and maybe a pair of Jordans somewhere in the same ballpark.
Okay. What about the most expensive meal out that you've paid for?
Most expensive meal out was my dinner meal that my wife actually paid for, but we're married, so money's the same. We went to Alinea in Chicago. I mean, Chicago people would know where that is, and it had to be $1,200 or more. I'm not even sure what the total tab came to be because she paid for it, but we go out to quite a few pretty nice dinners. So,
do you all have separate finances and pay for things differently that way, or is?
Yeah, not for any kind of good reason. Honestly, it's been one of those things that since we got married, we just didn't merge a ton of it. When my wife used to have a house and she sold that a couple of years ago, and when she sold it, we reinvested the proceeds of that into an account, a joint account, just like a high yield save account with Vanguard. So that's joint, but she has some kind of small checking and savings on her own. And then some of these other accounts are still in my name, but no good reason for it. Just call it laziness.
Okay. What about the most expensive car or vehicle or anything with a motor in it?
Both cars we have right now would definitely constitute that. I bought a Tesla Model S in 2016. It was probably 90 at the time after it was loaded up. And then my wife and I, when we found out that she was pregnant, she used to be driving a 2012 Ford Escape that was bought on a rebuilt title. So it was time for an upgrade for the safety of our future child. So we bought a Volvo XC90 Recharge recently. It was probably around 90 grand.
I love it, man. You're driving a 2012 worth several $million until you decide to have a kid. That's crazy.
Just a car.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's a key lesson that you learned from childhood?
From childhood, well, be competitive. Have a desire to win. Winning does mean a lot. The participation life's not for me.
Awesome. What about the most expensive trip or experience that you've paid for?
I got a good story on that one. So I don't know if this is the most expensive, but it's got to be up there. We had just gotten back from a trip to Norway, and we were at a charity auction in Chicago where I hadn't been to this particular charity auction before. And I was kind of expecting the auction items to be cheap little signed memorabilia, a couple $100 things, etc. And the last thing up for auction rather, was a trip to this villa off of an island in Bali called Sumba Island. And it sounded pretty cool. And the first bid went up at a number that I thought was like too cheap. So I, bid a bigger number, and then no one bid over the top of me. So the villa itself, we did it a charity thing. It was a $10,000 villa for I think 5 days. And then the airfare out there and the rest of it, you're probably looking at 25 to get out there, have a good time, and come back. And it also coincided with, we were supposed to go the week of COVID. And then when Indonesia finally opened back up, it's hard to go. It's the other side of the world, So about last year in June, when my wife was like 6 months pregnant or so, she's like, "Are we ever going to use this thing?" And I was like, "Screw it. We're going to book the tickets right now." And that's what we did. So that's where we had our little baby moon. And she was about as pregnant as you can be to fly an international flight where they will legally let you. So worked out great. It was awesome. It was an awesome place. If anybody's ever curious about somewhere to go, Sumba Island in Bali, can't beat it.
That's awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you say you love your profession?
Probably like an 8.5. The industry's tough. The clients are really tough to deal with. You got a super thick skin. But the thing I love most about it is helping business owners achieve their goals. It subsequently helps us with ours. Over the years, I've really started to enjoy dealing is the wrong word, kind of helping employees of ours mature and grow and build careers out of something that didn't used to exist, which is pretty cool. So a lot of the job joy comes from, seeing clients have great outcomes, as well as having our employees have, good joy and earning power and seeing them grow up as we go.
Okay. What's the most fun that you've ever had with money?
Travel for sure. I mean, Indonesia was awesome. We did a trip to Norway and then to Italy, and we were in Positano on the 4th of July. We did a trip to Greece for a couple weeks, a few years back. I mean, traveling definitely. And then maybe we bought the house next door. I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier. And in buying it, it's a kind of a rundown 3-flat, and the goal is going to be to tear it down and have a yard. So that might take the crown as fun money, not necessarily the best investment, but something that's good for the family and good for the future and good for the kiddos.
Are there any particular luxuries that you've indulged in as you've gotten, larger incomes and more wealth?
I'll splurge on things in the house now. I bought a really expensive outdoor television. We have a outdoor pergola area set up that would rival most resorts. So things along those lines, but not I haven't bought anything that's kind of nonsensical to just, throw on my wrist or whatever. My wife, for our wedding, bought me my dream watch, and that's the only one I got. So she bought me a Panerai. I love it. And other than that, gifts for her is pretty much about it.
Any indulgences for the baby?
She has a nursery that belongs in Architectural Digest. but honestly, a lot of it was sweat equity, though. I mean, we do a lot of stuff here internally, and I like building and doing things, not just paying somebody else to do it. It feels a little better that way to me. And honestly, most of her stuff is hand-me-down because we're the last group in our friend group to have kids. So when everyone found out that we were pregnant with a girl, we got, countless clothes and all sorts of stuff. But
yeah,
she's got pretty nice furniture in there. No hand-me-down crib, no hand-me-down dressers. She's got the Instagram room, I suppose, for her future life.
That's awesome. What's the dumbest thing you've ever wasted money on?
Dumbest thing ever wasted money on. Yeah, small amount of money wasted, I guess, in the hindsight. But I drove around for, it's got to be 3 years with a cable box in my trunk that I was getting charged $10 a month for because I didn't turn it in. Even though I passed the place, I could turn it in 100 times. And then one day I was with my wife somewhere and she was like, will you turn that damn thing in? And I was like, I probably should do that right now. And I went and took me 2 seconds. And so what's that? Probably 3 years at $10-15 a month. So do the math.
And you drove around with it in your truck the whole time?
It was just in my trunk thinking one day I'm going to take this back. And
oh, man.
Never did.
And it was just like drop off at UPS or something?
There was an Xfinity store literally like a mile and a half from my house. And I pass it when I go to work or when I'm going places.
Wow.
3-4 times a week. So,
what's something that you've spent a lot of money on or way too much money on, but you don't regret it?
House next door. I mean, that's what we spent a lot on. Don't regret it at all. And I think it'll be great in the future. Totally unnecessary investment. Overpaid for it. Don't care.
Cool. What's the craziest thing that you've ever done to earn money?
I used to work with all my good friends. It was actually pretty awesome. We used to work the merchandising booth at a large concert hall all in the Midwest. There's a few places that we would go, and we would be working from like 5 or 6 in the morning until 5 or 6 in the morning the next day, dealing with all sorts of interesting characters, basically selling t-shirts for cash and selling glow sticks in the giant mobs of people at Dave Matthews and Ozfest concerts and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, certain concerts, you'd end up with $500,000 in cash in a box, all guarded by some 55-year-old man with a 9mm, and they'd pay you a couple $100 at the end of the night, and you felt pretty good about it, except for the part where you saw him literally take a couple $100 out of this giant box, and you're like, "That's all I get for helping you generate all that." But long hours, but good time. But that or my first job. First job was with my dad. I worked with him doing construction cleanup. I was his grunt for the age of 8 until, well, still now. If he needs something done, he's calling me. I'm going to go be his grunt. So there you go.
That's awesome.
He doesn't pay me anymore, though. He used
to. How old do you think your dad was when he became a millionaire?
That's a great question. And I swear to God, he'd never answer it for me. But if I had to guess, he retired a few years early. So my guess is probably early 40s, 41, 42,
cool.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
That's awesome. What's a closely held belief that you once had that you recently changed your mind on?
Closely held belief I've recently changed my mind on. I don't know if you consider this as a belief, but I used to overplan a bit, and I'm over it. Over planning leads to lack of action, and action's what makes everything happen. And when I look back at the things that you didn't do that you regret, it came from overthinking and underdoing. So, you know, investing when I should have in more in 08, you know, overanalyze why we shouldn't. At work all the time, people overanalyzing and overbuilding these models. It's like, what's the point of all this research if there's no action that comes from it? So, you know, change the mentality of, ready, fire, aim now instead of ready, aim, keep aiming. And maybe one day you'll take it for a shot.
Awesome. Olin, any last pieces of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey?
Start now, put it in, whatever you feel comfortable, learn about it. Don't touch it. Don't look at it. Don't sell it. You know, it's play smart games. I mean, getting rich quick is not going to happen. And I'm just a big fan of putting money in S&P 500 fund, VOO, close your eyes, wake up 30 years later. You'll be pretty happy about it.
That's awesome. That's Olin with a net worth of $13.5 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.